It's that time of the year, baby. Things getting a little bit crazy across the college football landscape. We got the playoff rankings starting to take shape. We'll talk about that here in a second. But don't look now. We got National Signing Day a week from today. We have conference title weekend a week from this upcoming weekend. A lot is about to go down. Also, don't even get me started with the transfer portal. If you're not yet following Pete Nakos on Twitter, quick plug there. Follow him as well as the On3 transfer portal account. Bottom line, it's going down. All right, and with it going down, we will continue to talk about the greatest sport on the face of planet Earth, as we always do here every single day, live 3 times a week. Welcome into the hard count. It is Wednesday, November 27th, 2024. Last one on the face of the planet. I already told you now, the playoff rankings came out last night, as we always do on this show. We get the rankings. We let them digest for a second after we react to them seconds after they go off the air on their rankings reveal show. We're going to try and put those rankings into context as to what they mean here going forward, all right? Because we're at this point now where it is now valid to have real issues with the rankings before everyone's kind of just manufacturing outrage. I can't believe they got Indiana out that high. Y'all, Indiana still has a lot of games left to play. Now, though, with one game left in the regular season, we can start to have some objections and maybe more importantly, start to actually figure out what these rankings are saying about what these teams have to do to find themselves in the college football playoff. It's back, y'all. Hotel playoff. We're all the way in this thing. Also, Bryce Underwood now. We mentioned this already on a previous video on this channel. He flipped from LSU to Michigan. Who's Bryce Underwood, you ask? He is the number 1 player in America, number 1 quarterback in America. Was committed to LSU for almost a full year before flipping, I guess it was last week, to Michigan. Now, a big part of that flip was the involvement of Barstool founder Dave Portnoy, Larry Ellison, who is one of the co-founders, I believe, of Oracle, has a net worth north of $240 billion with a B. So there's a lot to that recruitment, and I think a lot of that recruitment now is going to be kind of a great awakening when it comes to the future of college football recruiting. So we'll unpack that one in a little more detail together. Also now the Florida future right now under DJ Lagway, Billy Napier coming back for another year. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Florida has the brightest future in the Sunshine State. Now, Miami is still the team in the state of Florida, but when you forecast 2025, I don't think it's irresponsible to say that Florida could be that team going forward that should be the most excited fan base in the entire state of Florida. So we'll give you our thoughts there, and then also I want us to unpack together just the current status of the Texas quarterback room. Now, hot take culture has made this a very delicate subject to approach. Anytime you say the word Arch Manning, you have just a very quick divide between folks that say he should be the starter. His last name's Manning. What 5-star? What are you talking about here? Quinn Ewers, if he throws one incompletion, get Arch Manning in the game. You have another group that I have actually stuck with for the majority of this entire conversation saying it's Quinn Ewers' football team. He won you the Big 12. He got you to the college football playoff last year. Let's all relax for a second. Take a chill pill. It's Thanksgiving. We're going to try and approach that conversation in a little bit more of a nuanced way. Because I think with A&M now, Arch Manning has got to have a role. We'll give you our thoughts. Glad to have y'all here. If you haven't yet subscribed, make sure you're dialed in. I just told you, man, madness is about to ensue, and none of us are safe from it. Doesn't matter if you're watching from Omaha, Nebraska, or if you're watching right here in Nashville, Tennessee. If you're a college football fan, madness and chaos is coming in the home stretch of this college football season. So without further ado, man, let's try and make sense of the madness of last night's rankings and unpack Hotel Playoff. So again, if you're new, Hotel Playoff goes like this. Got the penthouse, teams we feel great about. Teams that in discussion for this week's Hotel Playoff, I would say are more or less locks. You have teams in the lobby that I would say are not yet locks. You should feel really good about your chances. Those teams, in my mind, control their own destiny, all right? More on that in a second. Teams in the need a reservation category are teams that have a chance now. Your Clemsons of the world, your Alabamas of the world, but need a little help to find their way in. And then you got the G5 party, and that is a 3-team hangout right now. It's a good time, good kickback, and we'll give you that conversation here as we move forward. But let's start in the penthouse, man. Again, these are the teams that I would classify as your college football playoff locks. Who's in the penthouse? You got Oregon, you got Ohio State. I don't think we need to spend too much time talking about either of those teams. We saw what Ohio State did to Indiana. We've seen what Oregon's done all year long. Ohio State clinches a spot in the Big Ten championship game with a win this weekend over Michigan. They are darn near 3-touchdown favorites. Everyone expects them to handle business in Columbus. The curious part about this now, as we move forward into the college football playoff seeding discussion, if you watch last night's rankings, look at that 12 seed, like, hang on, that's actually the number 16 ranked team in the country. That's actually the Big 12 champ. and a multi-loss Arizona State, potentially now, if ASU does win the conference. Okay, so I mean, it's like, if you were to draw straws as to who would be or if you were to draft opponents, rather, I think ASU would be the first one off the board in terms of teams you could take in the first round of the college football playoff. No disrespect to the Sun Devils. In the second round, who do you play? The G5 rep. So while the winner of the Big Ten championship more likely than not will get the first seed in the college football playoff, that fifth seed may be the money spot. I'd much rather play one of those schools, just quite frankly, more than I would rather play a Tennessee or a Georgia, which is who on paper right now, if the playoff started tomorrow, who the number one seeded Oregon Ducks would draw in their first playoff game after their bye. So just keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that whole conversation. If you lose the Big Ten championship game, if we do get Oregon-Ohio State in the rematch, which I expect us to get, the loser isn't necessarily going home empty-handed. So those two teams, obviously, playoff locks. I don't see a way where either team gets left out with one game left in the season. You got Texas. Now, Texas might have been a little bit more anxious around their college football playoff aspirations before all the chaos broke loose in the SEC last week. I mean, I think there was some memo set out that was like, hey, if you are kind of on the college football playoff bubble as an SEC team, go ahead and drop your game this week. Alabama and Ole Miss did so accordingly. So Texas, even if they lose to A&M, I think still is a lock for the college football playoff. Now, if they beat A&M, they're even more a lock, and I think they feel better about their seeding for the college football playoff and would play Georgia in Atlanta. So, I mean, if they beat Georgia in Atlanta, then we're talking about Texas having to bye in the first round of the college football playoff. But regardless, Texas, for my money, locks Vegas. Now, speaking of locks Vegas, the Georgia Bulldogs, even if they lose to Georgia Tech, they will be in the SEC title game. And Georgia, I think, should feel more than confident about their chances to be in the college football playoff. Now, again, I don't expect Georgia to lose to Georgia Tech, just so we're on the same page there. But Georgia, kind of boring. I think the interesting thing about Georgia in this discussion around the college football playoff is what happens when you get them into a one-game season kind of mode. I don't know if we're there yet, but come that game in Atlanta, I think you kind of have that vibe to you if you're Kirby Smart. Definitely let's get to the college football playoff. It's a one-game season for everyone. We've seen now Kirby Smart in multiple spots this year. Post-Bama loss, post-Ole Miss loss. What do? They bounce back in a big way. Lose to Bama, go on a couple weeks later, beat the brakes off Texas at Texas. Lose to Ole Miss in convincing fashion, mind you. Circle the wagons, go play Tennessee in Athens, and make a statement there. So I'm just saying now, the one-game season kind of feel the sense of urgency that Georgia has behind them. Whenever they get into that spot, they're dangerous. So in my mind now, if you're going back to that whole drafting conversation, if you're going to draft first-round opponents, maybe you take an Arizona State first. I think Georgia would be the last one off the board if it were me. Maybe excluding an Ohio State or an Oregon, but I think they're definitely in that conversation. Now, Penn State, they're probably a lock for the college football playoff. I believe they play Maryland this week. It's no disrespect to Maryland. I just don't think that'll be much of a game. Caden Smith last night, he and I were in here watching the rankings, and he brought up a good point. Are these rankings or are these standings? Because if they're rankings, then we as a group of the college football playoff committee can use our eyeballs and see Penn State have a very, very much so too close for comfort kind of game with Minnesota, a game that I would say is probably too close for comfort against Wisconsin, a game against USC that did not really age all that great in terms of them going to overtime. Like, I'm looking at Penn State and I'm like, all right, man, like, are they a team that will probably be in the college football playoff based on resume? Yeah, but where are you going to seed them? Because the college football playoff last night had them ranked fourth. I don't think Penn State's the fourth best team in America, but I do think that their ranking is appropriate. So kind of a interesting give and take there. I'm very curious to see what they do come Selection Sunday with Penn State, because this committee keeps on telling us how much they care about the eye test outside of what Penn State is. So not a major qualm, if you will, but I do think Penn State and their status on Selection Sunday, not being a Big Ten championship kind of team, just kind of curious. Last team here in the locks category for the penthouse, Tennessee, Notre Dame. Get to y'all in a second, all right? Last team in the penthouse for us is Indiana. Indiana plays Purdue in the Old Oaken Bucket this weekend. The Old Oaken Bucket this weekend. And, I think we know what Indiana is. Like, we saw them play Ohio State. We saw them get ragdolled by Ohio State in Columbus. And a lot of folks, I think, were very quick to say, all right, Indiana, man, they don't have the juice. They're not – are we sure they're a college football playoff team? Fair question. Again, the SEC kind of cannibalized itself, and now Indiana should feel great about their chances, why they're in the penthouse for us this week. But just because Indiana's not going to win the national championship doesn't mean we shouldn't give them their flowers. Like, Kurt Cignetti took over an operation that took over the job at Indiana, not because the coach at Indiana before him was just knocking it out of the park. Indiana won 3 games last year. Indiana won one conference game last year. They got ragdolled by a team that's considered by most to be the best roster in college football. So, like, Indiana, in a lot of ways, would you have liked to put a better foot forward? Yeah. Was Indiana ever really considered a national title contending team? I don't think so. And I could be wrong on that as this thing progresses, but I'd be shocked if Indiana's there at the end and playing for a national title or anywhere in that conversation. Love Kurt Cignetti, love Indiana, but that's just how I feel about it. So put them in the penthouse. They'll make the playoff, but what they do when they get there, I have my reservations. Now, in the lobby, these are the teams. Excuse me, I get choked up talking about it. Gets us emotional this time of year. The lobby portion of Hotel Playoff for this week's segment is teams that I would say control their own destiny. Now, Tennessee and Notre Dame are 1A and 1B right there. Tennessee, you beat Vandy. You're a double-digit point favorite. Got to go to Nashville now. Short little car ride. You got an 11 a.m. local kick. Kind of sleepy. Diego Pavia ruins seasons. That's what he does. Handle business. You're in the playoff. You should win this football game. The curious thing about Tennessee now is, what do they look like when they get there? Maybe more importantly, what does Nico Iamaleava look like when he gets there? And I want to see him put on a show against Vandy. And I say put on a show, I would settle for like a couple of big pass completions down the field. Because what he is versus SEC opponents and what he is versus non-conference opponents, two very different discussions. And so I'd like to see him do it against an SEC team. I understand Vandy and the logo, people still have, I think, a hard time getting on board with them being a good football team. Vandy's a good team. Ask Bama, ask Texas. Like, Vandy's a good football team. So if I'm Tennessee, can we kind of rev the engine this weekend? I think you'll make the college football playoff just winning that game, but you feel a lot better about your chances once you get to the college football playoff if Nico goes, call it 22 for 28, 279, 3 touchdowns. A couple of those are bombs. I think that's the way you'd like to live your life. Curious to watch that. Now, as I mentioned Notre Dame, the good folks over on our Notre Dame on 3 message board, blueandgold.com, they have been just at my head for the better part of the last 24 hours, and I appreciate them for it. A lot of passion out there in South Bend. The frustration for them is like, hey, why are we not ranked higher in your rankings, JD? Why are we? I mean, the College Football Playoff Committee's got us at 5. Why are we darn near towards the back end of like number 8, number 9 in your rankings? I have my reservations about Notre Dame. I've made that very clear. I like Riley Leonard as a quarterback. I don't know if I love him for what this offense needs to win a national championship. He has yet to throw over 250 yards in any game this season. He's gone over 200 yards a handful of times. If Notre Dame gets into a shootout, I don't know if I feel amazing about them. I give that preface to say Notre Dame is still one of the best teams in college football right now. Like, the NIU loss gets them dunked on social media, and it's a reason, quite frankly, why I have them where I have them in my own personal rankings. But Notre Dame also still beat A&M at A&M. Now, it wasn't Marcel Reed playing quarterback, but I think that win should still count for something. Notre Dame also has left zero room for any conversation around them being in the college football playoff to this point. Like, they have the number 1 margin of victory in college football, 27 points a game. They're beating the britches off people, man. So if Notre Dame beats USC at USC this weekend, they're in the dance, and I think they deserve to be in the dance, just so we're aligned there. So Tennessee, Notre Dame could definitely both be in the penthouse conversation. I don't feel as confident as putting them as locks by nature of who they have this last game of the season. But just so we're aligned, we feel great about both those teams, think they'll both be in the playoff, think they both win their games this weekend. Now, the ACC gets very, very interesting. Miami and SMU, I would expect that to be our ACC title game. Clemson could sneak in there if Miami loses to Syracuse this upcoming weekend. SMU has already punched their ticket to the ACC title game. Miami, again, has got one game of work to do. Both teams obviously control their own destiny for the college football playoff. If you win the ACC, you're in the dance with the first-round bye. The thing with Miami I want to talk through first, I said this last night, I said it on a previous video, if Miami gets into that field of 12, assuming Boise State is there as well, you can make a very strong case for Ashton Jeanty being the best player in that bracket. I think I'd lean towards Cam Ward being the best player in the whole college football playoff. To put it a step further, I think Cam Ward is the most impactful player in that entire college football playoff field for Miami. Because would Miami, I said this yesterday, would they be a team that you favor on a neutral site against, I don't know, call it a Georgia? I happen to believe Georgia would be somewhere in the range of a 1-score favorite, if not more. But if I'm Cam Ward, I'm saying just get me in the door. Get me on the field with somebody else for 4 quarters. Let me do what I do. And if you're Miami, you got a chance. We've seen Miami and their horsepower when they put it together. Now, the frustrating thing is you've only seen Miami put it together with a little bit of a sense of urgency outside of that Florida game. Like, A lot of the times you see Miami put it together when they are messing with their food for the first half against somebody, or they're down after the first half against somebody. The Cal game comes to mind. The Va-Tech game comes to mind. The Duke game, heck, comes to mind. Like, if Miami can actually put it all together for 4 quarters, they're going to be a threat. Going to be a very, very massive threat. So all I'll say, the Cam Ward effect is very, very real. Now, SMU is interesting to talk through. Again, they win the ACC. They're in. There's no discussion about it. Here's the curious part to me about SMU. So last night, the rankings come out. SMU is ranked 9th. They are seeded 10th. In reality, the 9th seed doesn't actually have all that much cushion as much as it sounds. You're saying, wait, ranked 9th, there's 12 teams. You got a 3-spot cushion. Well, not actually. In my mind, you have a 1-spot cushion because 10 is Indiana. Okay, got it. 11 is Boise State. Boise State is, by most people's projections, going to be the G5 rep for the college football playoff. That 12th ranked team is Clemson. Clemson, in this discussion, is out of the college football playoff if it started tomorrow. Why? Because the Big 12 champ, projected to be the highest ranked Big 12 team, is Arizona State at 16. So they would move up to that 12th seed. So the way that I'm looking at this thing, I'm not a math guy, but when I look at the numbers here, SMU only has a 1-spot cushion. Now, if they win this weekend, how much more do they climb up? Maybe a spot? I mean, maybe if the committee's kind of feeling generous, they get some chaos in front of them, maybe 2 spots. If I'm SMU, I don't want to leave it to chance for us to get to that ACC title game. If we get beat, I don't know if you get in. So we'll see what happens there. The Clemson story arc there is kind of interesting as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But SMU, curious, very, very curious to see what happens with them, especially after this weekend. Now, after this weekend, too, is a massive thing you're talking about if you're A&M. Because A&M, don't look now, even after the loss to Auburn, they control their own destiny. Like A&M and their record looks like a record that should be in the need a reservation category. Y'all, I mean, if they beat Texas, punch their ticket to Atlanta, you're 4 quarters away from punching your ticket to the college football playoff. And again, if you're A&M, I think it's not wild to assume they could be a 3-loss team with wins over Texas and Georgia as an SEC champion. I think Texas A&M would get a bye in the first round of the college football playoff. Forget the fact they're ranked 20 last night. I think they would ascend up those rankings and find themselves as one of the highest, or 4 highest ranked rather, conference champions. So again, we'll see what they are, but you feel good about your chances if you're A&M because of the fact that you control your own destiny and because of the fact that you got Texas at home. We'll see. All I'll say is we'll see. Now, quick plug here. The Hard Count brought to you by Prize Picks. Code HARDCOUNT, $50 in lineups when you play $5 in promo funds. Again, code HARDCOUNT, prizepicks.com. I mention this now because in the Texas A&M game, there's a square I love. Marcel Reed, 179.5 pass yards. We'll take the more there. Coming off a big game against Auburn, I think they will come out swinging. I think they will probably have to throw the football to beat Texas. Expect Marcel Reed to hit the more on that square. Again, code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, $50 in promo funds. I think Prize Picks also got a little free square action for the boys this weekend. Tyreek Hill, half a receiving yard. So get in on that. Use the Marcel Reed square as well, and we'll be in business. So 2 more teams to talk about here. I want to talk about them together in the lobby. Arizona State and Iowa State. The Big 12 is madness. It's absolutely madness. And we will unpack the madness together at the end of this show. Caden Smith and I sat down and just did like essentially Algebra 2 all the way through all these different scenarios, and he broke it down, and it is something else. So drink your caffeine if you are watching this live. Arizona State and Iowa State, for simplicity's sake, are the favorites to play in the Big 12 championship game. We'll put that right there. So if you're Arizona State or Iowa State, win your conference, you're in the dance. How many times have I said you're in the dance this segment? I don't know, but the point remains the same. So ASU and Iowa State, they're still in that college football playoff conversation. They're still in the lobby by nature of them. Controlling their own destiny is a funny way to put it, but like generously speaking, control their own destiny to a degree. All right, so this is the part of the conversation that gets really juicy. We got need a reservation. And by what the ranking said last night, man, whether you are in agreement or you couldn't disagree more, these are the rankings. You got Clemson at 12 and Bama at 13. Now, Clemson has the luxury of playing a top 15 South Carolina this weekend. So if Clemson is able to beat, let's just say they convincingly beat South Carolina at home. We don't have that happening, hand up. But if they do that, think about the juice that would be for that operation out there and what that would mean for them when it comes to their potential to jump into that top 11. Because they're 12 right now. They would be bumped out because of the conference champion projected from the Big 12 being below that top 12. But, like, there's a path there for Clemson. I think you're rooting for a Notre Dame loss. I don't think you would hate it if Alabama lost as well and kind of got you some buffer behind you as well. All I'm saying now, there is a path. There is very much so a path, and you are rooting hard for anybody and everybody ahead of you to lose. So that's probably the most makeable path. Alabama, I mentioned them being behind Clemson at 13. They don't have the same juicy opponent this weekend from a ranking perspective in South Carolina, but Alabama plays Auburn. Auburn now probably helped themselves a little bit in the eyes of the committee. You would have to believe as an opponent for Alabama beating A&M this past weekend. At the end of the day now, Alabama sitting at 13. Convincing win over Auburn. Kind of what we said for Clemson. Root for madness ahead of you. You should feel okay about your chances to get in. Now from Alabama, I'm also rooting pretty hard for South Carolina. And South Carolina is also in this need a reservation category. South Carolina was ranked 15 last night, and they have the luxury, same thing with Clemson, playing a ranked opponent. They play a team that is ranked in that top 12. So if South Carolina can go out there and blow the doors off of Clemson, and if Bama could lose, a lot of ifs, a lot of potentials. If Bama could lose, Notre Dame could lose, Tennessee could lose. Like if they get some wiggle room, they could backdoor their way into this thing. So I think the backdoor main suspects are Clemson, Bama, South Carolina. Those are the ones that I'm watching most closely. Ole Miss, I think you have to put them in this discussion just because of the fact they also have 3 losses. They also have the head-to-head over a South Carolina. They're ranked a spot ahead of South Carolina, a spot behind Alabama at 14. So Ole Miss, they're in the discussion. I'd be surprised if they had a ton of luck jumping anybody because of the fact they play Mississippi State this weekend. No knock on the Fighting Jeff Lebby's, just not quite as much excitement as maybe a South Carolina or a Clemson would for those two opponents. Keep an eye on Ole Miss, but we'll mention them right now. And then the Big 12, again, it's madness. BYU and Colorado are two of the teams that are in contention for the Big 12 championship. They have a 6-2 record in the conference right now, which is tied with Arizona State and Iowa State. However, the tiebreakers work in such a way to where that wouldn't necessarily benefit them if it came down to just tiebreakers alone. The scenario that's most digestible, if you will, is if you get a Iowa State and Arizona State lost this weekend, BYU and Colorado, I believe, would then be your two teams that would play in Jerry World for the Big 12 championship. Kato, I'm good on that? We're right on that? Okay, we got a thumbs up. That's good news. Okay, so that segment's going to be madness later. But just, okay, we'll say that. If you're a Colorado fan or a BYU fan, root for those teams ahead of you to lose, and we'll unpack those scenarios a little bit later. So that's all the teams need a reservation. Here's the teams in the G5 party. And it went from like a party. It was raging early on in the year. You had Army in there. You had Navy in there. Vibes were immaculate. It is now a 3-team kickback. So Waka Flocka was throwing the Grove Street party early on. It's now Waka Flocka's little get-together. Boise State, look around you, baby. Nobody to your left. Nobody to your right. Sprint through the finish line. Ashton Jeanty, help yourself with the Heisman Trophy a little bit there and try and boost yourself with the votes a little bit in that regard. If Boise State wins the Mountain West, by nature of what this committee is telling us, with Boise State being at 11 last night, you will not just make the college football playoff, but thank the Big 12, you'll get a bye in the first round of the college football playoff. Now, you'll end up playing more than likely the 5 seed, which could be the Big 10 runner-up. But if you're Boise State, handle business, probably have to beat UNLV in your conference championship to get that bye, but that's also another thing that I think benefits Boise State here. They're not playing like Joe Schmo University in the Mountain West Conference Championship. They're playing a ranked UNLV team. Now, that's the other conversation here. What if UNLV finds their way into the Mountain West Conference Championship? Say they beat Boise State. Do they have a case here? Do they have a case to catapult themselves in? And then that third team here, it's in the conversation of the kickback, like Boise State, UNLV having a good time. They're on the aux. They're having appetizers. They're having libations. Tulane is kind of just back there on the corner. And it's that meme you see on social media a lot where it's the guy against the corner with the thought bubble of, they don't know I can make the college football playoff. Like that is Tulane right now. Up against the wall, just watching it all happen. They don't know I can make the college football playoff. It would take some madness. It would take something wacky. But Tulane now, do not count them out. If they win their conference, they could potentially, with the right amount of bizarre going on, be the highest-ranked G5 champ. So Boise State, UNLV, hanging out in the G5 kickback. Rest in peace to the G5 party. So to recap it here, in hotel playoff, in the penthouse, your teams that, barring something wildly unforeseen, are more or less locks in my mind. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Penn State, and Indiana both have games that matter this weekend. I'd be surprised if they lost. I'd be surprised if either way they were left out of the college football playoff. You talk about the lobby, man. Tennessee, Notre Dame, Miami, SMU, A&M controlling their own destiny. Arizona State and Iowa State all just hanging out there, having a good time. And I think most of them, if not all of them, control their own destiny for the college football playoff. Tennessee and Notre Dame especially, obviously the two ACC teams. A&M controls their own destiny, and the Big 12 is madness. We'll talk about that later. Who needs a reservation right now? You got Clemson, Bama, BYU, Colorado, and Ole Miss. South Carolina also needs a reservation. They are invisible on the graphic, but I promise you they're there. G5 party, Boise State, UNLV, Tulane, all hanging out with Waka Flocka and a good old G5 kickback. So a lot of teams still in it now. I feel like I need to be just transparent and say this every single show whenever we discuss the new format. Whenever I say anything positive about the new format, I feel like obligated to just say, hey, I was against this, because I was, and quite frankly, if we were still at 4, I'll be down for 4. If we went to 6, I would have been down for 6. But I do appreciate what the 12-team playoff is in regards to what conference realignment and the transfer portal has brought us. If we didn't have the realignment tectonic plates in Texas in the Big 12 and you got no new teams in the Big 10, okay, I'd have a harder time getting on board with it. But I think this season has cooked itself up perfectly to be a great exhibit A as to why the 12-team playoff has been a lot of fun this year. Okay, so again, I'm still pro 4-team, but I'm not going to be the guy now that's walking off the college football landscape plank and saying, I'm done with this, I'm out of here. No, 12-team playoff's been great, and I'm excited to watch how it formulates the rest of the regular season. Last thing I'll say, Texas and Texas A&M for a spot in Atlanta, poetry, absolute poetry. Now, speaking of poetry, Bryce Underwood is committed to Michigan. Nothing really poetic about that, but it just felt like the right segue there. And there's, I think, more to this recruitment than what meets the eye. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Bryce Underwood, #1 player in the class of 2025, a quarterback 30 minutes from Michigan and their campus, from the state of Michigan, in their backyard, was committed to LSU for a long time, a long, long time. And then around 3-ish weeks, maybe a month ago, you started to kind of get rumblings of, hey, don't look now, Michigan's trying to get in the game for Bryce Underwood. Hey, Michigan is swinging a big bat trying to find their way to land the #1 quarterback, #1 player in America. And you looked at that and you said, okay, cool. LSU has still got, from what we can tell, a better quarterback pedigree of recent history with Jaden Daniels, obviously different staff, but like the Joe Burrow optics probably don't hurt LSU in that discussion. I was very, very much so like, that's awesome, good for Michigan getting in the NIL game, but I don't see it. Now, as we get more details to this whole thing, it was a major push on the NIL front to land Bryce Underwood, and that's where this gets interesting, because I think the Bryce Underwood recruitment is a blueprint of sorts to what the new college football landscape can be when it comes to recruiting. It has never been more accessible to be relevant as a program in college football. Now, Michigan's going to be relevant regardless because of the logo. We're going to talk about them if they're winning 10 games. We're going to talk about them if they're 0-12. But still, with the landing of a Bryce Underwood, the NIL part of this, I think from what we can tell, was a massive part of this, is a massive part of this going forward. And here's where I want us to really settle in. Dave Portnoy, founder of Barstool, went on a Barstool show. I want to say it was a couple of months ago. And he just came right out and said, he's like, I'm going to go get Michigan a quarterback. And there's a part of this with the content that is Barstool where you're like, this could be a joke, but he seems pretty serious. And he was pretty serious. And then it kind of formulated to a place where it was like, all right, Dave Portnoy is going to try and go get Michigan a quarterback. Awesome. And then he goes on another Barstool program yesterday and unpacks how they ended up landing Bryce Underwood and how they were able to pitch him with NIL. Let's set the scene here a little bit more. Dave Portnoy, the way that he tells it, he's got someone from the Michigan football team that reaches out to him and says, hey, there's someone that's a big fan of you, big fan of Barstool. They want to, they're a donor. They want to talk to you and try to help you land a quarterback from Michigan. He's like, listen, I appreciate you. I work alone. Thanks so much, Mr. Incredible style. I'm good. So no. Again, she really wants to talk to you. Her husband's someone named Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison, I had to do my research here. He is the co-founder of Oracle. He is a net worth north of $240 billion. If you're listening on podcast, if you're watching live on YouTube, that's billion with a B, the second letter of the alphabet. Okay, so this is a guy with big pockets, one of the richest human beings in the world. His wife wants to get in the game on landing a Michigan quarterback. So he's like, actually, okay, yeah, you know what? Put her through. Let's take that call. Let's figure this out. So the way that he tells it, they get on a Zoom, and essentially what Larry Ellison's wife, Jolyn, says is, I want to win natties. Like, she apparently went to Michigan during the Brady Hoke era, and Michigan just, quite frankly, wasn't really up to par with what that fan base expects during that era. And she says, I can't, the way that Portnoy tells it, she said, I can't stomach waking up on a Saturday knowing we're not the best team on the football field. All right, so obviously this desire to have Michigan be a team that's winning national titles again, like they did last season, translates to the idea of we need a quarterback. Quarterback this year was nowhere near good enough. Who can we go get? Oh, I don't know, the best quarterback in high school football that's 30 minutes from our campus. So as it goes, they end up pitching Bryce Underwood. I don't know if this is tied to Dave Portnoy and the Ellisons, but Tom Brady ends up getting involved here to some respect. And this is where I look at Brian Kelly and LSU, and I'm like, yeah, it's a bad look. What were you supposed to do? One of the richest human beings in the world, one of the icons in media, period, and Dave Portnoy, and the best person to ever touch a football in the history of the game, Tom Brady, hitting up Bryce Underwood. So, what I'm trying to say here is there was a very evident push from the powers that be around Michigan, people that care about Michigan football, to get this deal done. The alleged NIL package is somewhere in the neighborhood of double-digit $1 million over 3 to 4 years. Yeah, that's gonna probably cork the battle a little bit for you when you have those conversations with the number one player in high school football. So going back to what I said at the top of this thing, this doesn't happen without a tremendous care factor from a Dave Portnoy, from a Jolyn Ellison, from a Larry Ellison, those people caring about Michigan football, even though none of them, from my understanding, have ever suited up a day in their life and run out of that tunnel and touched the banner that hangs over the Michigan football field when they run out on the field. Even though they've never suited up, even though they're not on staff, they don't call plays, they were able to impact the future of Michigan football by landing, quite frankly, the future of Michigan football at the quarterback position. Here's the thing now, I don't think they're done. I think that the overall care factor at Michigan will continue to benefit them on the NIL front to land more top talent, not to mention that top talent probably wants to play with Bryce Underwood. But one more thing that Dave Portnoy said on the Barstool program, I think it was yesterday that it aired, he said this is more or less a renaissance of Michigan football is what this recruitment will be known as. And maybe it sounds a little bit wild to hear out loud. I don't think he's wrong. Take it a step further, I think this recruitment is going to serve as a great awakening in the college football recruiting landscape. Why? Because honestly now, you are seeing, if you are any millionaire of an alumni of any school that cares about college football, or you care about college football as an alumni, you're being told here in bold, neon flashing lights, if you care, you can change things. What you do, what you pay, what you give can really make a difference. Bryce Underwood, from my understanding, I never heard anything around him flipping from Michigan before the NIL conversations started to bubble up. From what I understood, this dude was going to LSU. Then one of the richest people in the world gets in the game, along with Dave Portnoy. They make the flip. Why? These people, the way they cared about Michigan football, they want to win national championships. That had an impact on landing the top player in college football. Now, I also want to say this. I don't think it's not quite as simple as activating the cash flow, because you also have to have, I think, the right structure in place to then put that cash flow where it needs to go. There has to be some alignment there from a boosters to a coaching staff to a general manager perspective, and Michigan had all that right. But if you're able to activate the funds and have the apparatus to correctly allocate those activated funds, there is no guardrails to what you can do in the new era of college football. The gears kind of got turning here. Nebraska fans, I don't know what Warren Buffett thinks about your football team or if he cares at all about the Cornhuskers and what they do on Saturdays. He's an alum. You activate the Warren Buffett funds, what can Nebraska be? Looking at North Carolina, Michael Jordan, man, I don't know Michael Jordan's net worth. Have to imagine he's doing okay for himself. How about the Jordan brand in general? Even if Michael Jordan says, I don't care about Saturday afternoons in the fall, someone at Jordan brand probably cares enough to make the entire college football operation out there in Chapel Hill outfitted in Jordan gear. If you can activate the funds and you can put the funds in the right place with the right structures, you can do whatever you want. I mean, this kind of has flown under the radar. I don't know how much this is impacting them this season, but SMU, it was kind of a sleepy storyline. They put a lot of money into their NIL. Missouri, I promise you, going forward, if they put that NIL that they have allegedly put into their college football team and it goes to the right places, they could be a force here. So what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, college football is still about players. It's still about talent, right? Like, there's still that pretty large talent gap. When I have more 5 stars than you, I should be at a pretty good advantage to win the football game. So now the prerequisite to getting those 5 stars, development's huge, relationships is huge, but another pillar of that equation now, whether we like it or not, NIL is a part of this. And so if you have NIL, you can then activate that to land top talent to go win national championships like Dave Portnoy and like the Ellisons are attempting to do here with Michigan. Because in the new college football playoff format, I said it yesterday, I'll say it again, you got to win 3 to 4 games. You don't win 3 to 4 games with an average quarterback. And so that's why you're seeing these quarterbacks, whether it be via the portal, whether it be at the high school level, they're going to get their bags, and they deserve them. If you want to win big-time football games, you want to go big, win big-time hardware, you better be willing to pay big-time dollars to land the right guy to do so. One more thought on this. I'm curious now, speaking to the activation and the coaching staffs, things like that, I'm curious when the powers that be, like let's say that, let's just put ourselves in another universe. Let's say that we're back a year from now, give or take. Jim Harbaugh's just left for the Chargers, and Michigan's going to go external with their coaching search. Who's to say that the Ellisons and Dave Portnoy don't say, all right, we're willing to pay a bag for anybody. Like, if we don't land a head coach here at Michigan, it's not going to be because we weren't willing to pay double whatever anybody else is trying to pay. Like, I know it's kind of a wild thought to have right now because this discussion is about landing players, but I don't think we're all that far removed from boosters and from other powers that be of this caliber that, haven't historically been involved to the same degree going after big-name head coaches. Food for thought. So the Bryce Underwood recruitment is massive on a number of levels for Michigan. It's a great sign of the future for Michigan on the field. In terms of the direction for the NIL, that's all massive. Michigan will be a force if Bryce Underwood projects how we expect him to project to the college level. But this is a great awakening in college football. You got a care factor, you got a chance. Because you'll more than likely have the players you need to have a chance. Hey, appreciate everyone tuned in live right now. Make sure you have subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. A lot going on here in the future, man. I just told you before this whole thing, madness is set to ensue here for the next couple of weeks across college football. National Signing Day, the transfer portal, conference title weekend. We got rivalry weekend this weekend. A lot to get to, so we appreciate y'all being dialed in to the nth degree. We're going to enjoy it like nobody else in this space is going to enjoy it. I'll tell you that much. So we talked about this season a little bit just then, but I want us to, let's take a quick check-in on what's going out there in Gainesville, Florida. Because, honestly, hand up, Florida, for a lot of people, myself included, after that A&M game, I was kind of like, all right, Billy Napier's on borrowed time. We'll see what they are here these next couple of weeks. Who's the next head coach at Florida? That was the discussion we all started to have. Now, you fast forward the tape, after a couple of big-time wins, after a top 10 win over Ole Miss, Florida now, I'll say this, I don't think it's that crazy to say that the Gators have the brightest future in this Sunshine State going into 2025. More on that in a second. Make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. I prefaced it before in the live show. Want you all a part of this. Want you dialed in. It's college football, nothing but college football. We appreciate you in advance for that. So what's clear to me about Florida right now is Billy Napier, for all of the flack that he has caught, has built an actual foundation to his football team. And the reason why we can say that safely is because Florida, they've taken haymakers on the jaw a lot this year. The Miami game, bam, right across the chin. The Texas A&M game, bam, right in the occipital lobe. I don't even know where that is, but it probably hurt. That was Florida early on. And just like one of my favorite movies in Kicking and Screaming, like Will Ferrell said, I took a punch from Mike Ditka. Florida took a punch from Miami, took a punch from A&M. They did not go down. They wobbled a little bit, but they did not go down. Why don't you fall over when you got strong legs? What are your legs? The base, the foundation of who you are. That's Florida right now. Okay? And so the fact they were able to not just not fall over, but collect themselves, move forward without their starting quarterback in Graham Mertz, who is done for this season, go to a true freshman in DJ Lagway, and then ball the heck out and have a close game with Georgia that folks in Gainesville would still tell you today, hey, Lagway stays healthy, we'll win that football game. It sounded a little more crazy in that moment after the Georgia game, than it does right now if you beat LSU and Ole Miss in back-to-back weeks. There is like a legitimate product in Gainesville. It's not just projection. Like, that's the crazy part about this whole situation. Like, we're not just extrapolating a couple of close losses for Florida into, well, they could get over the hump. Did that last year. I did that many times. The Missouri game, the Florida State game last year, I was like, hey, if they could have a couple of games go differently, they're a 7-5 football team. I still feel that way about last year. We're not talking about that, though. We're talking about Florida getting over the hump in certain spots against good football teams. Like, you cannot convince me LSU and Ole Miss aren't still good opponents. Are they better than Florida on that day? No. Now, what I want to go back to is what I just said. For Florida, it's not crazy to say that in 2025, they may have the brightest future. Now, here's what I didn't say. I did not say they're the best team in the state of Florida right now. Miami, I think it's pretty fair to say, based on what they did in week 1 and based on what they're doing right now, trying to make their way into the college football playoff, they're still the top dog in the state as of right now. But again, fast forward the tape, 2025. That's the context of this discussion. Mario Cristobal, he's going to recruit. Have to believe they're going to have the talent that they are after in 2025. They'll be ready to go. But Cam Ward's not coming back. Xavier Estrepo, he's not coming back. Put it this way, how many wins was Cam Ward good for this year for Miami? I've said it before. He might be the best player in college football, not named Travis Hunter. But he probably was good for, 3 wins? 2 wins if we want to be kind of stingy. Like, he is a major difference maker for Miami. You take him off the roster, not saying that you can't just go on and still have a ton of success and make the college football playoff next season, but I am saying it's fair to have questions. Also, there's been rumors around Shannon Dawson potentially taking a head coaching job. Lose your offensive coordinator. Again, if that were to happen, I'm not saying it's going to happen. If it were to happen, it's fair to have question marks there. Now, Florida, yeah, they'll have some pieces they lose, of course, as well. It's just the way that new college football works. But Florida has finished the year so strong with wins over LSU and Ole Miss with to be honest here, a less than 100% healthy DJ Lagway, without your best weapon in Eugene Wilson. And also, they've had to overcome a ton of noise this year for Florida. Like, the thing that excites me in the future is, yes, you got a quarterback going into 2025, which is a non-negotiable for success in college football. But maybe as importantly, like, the external circumstances around Florida are just so much better set up for success. Like, the fact that you would hope, at least for those first few games of the season, there isn't the noise around, hey, Billy Napier's getting fired. Hey, Billy Napier's going to lose his job. And if that is the discussion, shame on Florida, shame on everything going on out there. But I don't think that will be the case. Also, speaking of circumstances externally, talk about internal circumstances. For Florida, they were staring down the barrel of this crazy schedule in their crazy November. They got 2 wins in November over teams that nobody thought they were supposed to get wins over with a true freshman quarterback. What are they next year with a true sophomore quarterback, with a more ideally built-out roster around him? Because Florida now, I mean, it's been reported by our very own Pete Nakos, they're going to go after it in the transfer portal. They're going to take some big swings and try and surround him with the right guys. So I think the curious thing now for Florida, the opportunity to finish the year with a bang, the optics is absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. And you could tie this to Miami if you want to, and this is not me being in any way, shape, or form down on Miami. Picked Miami to be a college football playoff team, picked them to win the ACC. Cam Ward will be a Heisman finalist. This is all like in the context of next year. In the context of next season, if Florida goes out and beats Florida State the way that Miami beat them to start the year, think about the bookend that would be to their season, man. Think about the momentum that would give them. Their over-under win total was like 4.5 going into the year, 5.5, depending on where you looked. To finish with 7 wins, 3 of them in the month of November that everyone was telling us before the year at the Hunger Games. I said that on this very show, that they had the upside down to finish the season. To get 3 wins with a freshman quarterback? They're favored by 15. If you told me this was a 15-point spread all the way back at SEC Media Days, I'd say, dang, Florida State's a 15.5-point favorite, huh? No, Florida is a 15-point favorite. And the Florida State operation over there, of course, they've lost some juice because of the way the season has gone. There's no way to sugarcoat that. But to be able to finish the year with a bang and then go to a bowl game, have a sick bowl game ideally and ball out there, Florida with 8 wins, with a bowl win, again, I'm just saying, it's a hypothetical, it's an if, but think about the momentum, the statement for what Florida would be next year, the statement for recruits of where that thing is headed, and the statement, quite frankly, internally of like, hey, we can do this. The feeling for Florida is like, we can do this going forward behind DJ Lagway. So I think, the optics are huge there for Florida. It is not by any stretch of the imagination, I don't think, irresponsible to say that Florida in 2025 could have the highest ceiling and brightest future moving into next season. So we'll unpack that when we get there. It's going to be wild, man. It's going to be wild. I cannot wait to watch what Florida does here surging towards National Signing Day if they do finish the year with a bang. And I cannot wait to see what they do in the transfer portal. That's the curious part to me. Because you gave Billy Napier another season, swing big, go get some weapons for Lagway, beef up the defense, beef up the line of scrimmage. Like, let's take a big swing here, baby. It's the best kind of swings to take. Speaking of big swings, Texas is going to go for a big swing here against A&M. They haven't played since 2011. Winner goes to Atlanta. Forget the fact that Texas is probably good even if they lose this game to go to the college football playoff. Like, this is one now that you want for every fiber of your being because of the fact that it's a rivalry game and you hate either side of this. There's enormous hate. And I'm not super pro hate kind of guy, oddly enough. But in the context of college football rivalry weekend, hate is a beautiful thing. Now, the thing I want us to unpack together here is my take on this game as we move closer and closer towards it. I think if you're Texas, offensively, you have had some moments where you see the offense look very Steve Sarkisian-like. Run the football well, that's great. Quinn Ewers kind of trying to find it a little bit. Some of it you say, okay, well, he was injured for a while, out of rhythm. I think Arch Manning needs a role in the game against Texas A&M. Now, here's what I did not say. I did not say Arch Manning's your starting quarterback, hand in the keys, Quinn Ewers, thanks so much, you're on the bench, brother. Did not say that. I'm also not suggesting that it should be a thing where Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers like rotate every 2-3 drives and there's some weird like quarterback controversy in the biggest game of your season at this point. Not suggesting that either. What I am saying is Arch Manning should have a role. Give him a couple of packages, primarily in my mind, quarterback run centric. I think that's the high tide that would raise all boats. Now, this is a tough topic to discuss because I've been the guy the entire time saying Quinn Ewers is your quarterback. I still feel that way. If you want to give Arch Manning the keys going into the Texas A&M game, which I don't think anybody is calling for, but you would forfeit all the experience you have with the guy who won you the Big 12, slayed the Dragon in Tuscaloosa, played a college football playoff game. Like, you don't really, I don't think, want to open yourself up to the potential of some growing pains. So we're going to try and discuss this in the most like level-headed way possible because what I'm calling for, again, is another layer to the offense where Arch Manning goes in the game, some quarterback design run game stuff, some read option, some inverted veer stuff with the jet sweep, allow him, obviously, a couple of passing plays off of that. But I love this so much for a number of reasons. Like, the first part of this is A&M, if you go watch their game against South Carolina, Arch Manning, different player than Lenora Sellers, but Lenora Sellers gashed A&M a few times on design quarterback runs. You don't have that with Quinn Ewers. Now, it's not Quinn Ewers, but the ankle injury plus just his play style in general, he's not a dual threat guy. So you don't have that on the table. When is it ever a smart idea to take something out of your game plan that could help you? Makes no sense. Also, it's Wrinkle season, right? Like, I mean, if you don't think Steve Sarkisian has been in the lab all off season planning for just this game, putting things on tape to then zig when they zag against A&M, like it's that time of year where you throw in these wrinkles. It's that time of the year where you give your backup quarterback a couple of packages, get him in there on 3rd and short, and allow him to move forward for a big first down and get the crowd fired up. Well, not the crowd fired up because it'll be in College Station. Get the crowd back home fired up. Like that's what you have here in this spot. It's not time to go home with plays in the playbook or bullets in the chamber. Like you empty the clip, and I think emptying the clip is getting Arch Manning in the football game. I mentioned that too with the mobility of Quinn Ewers. He's already not super mobile. He's dinged up. Like, this allows you the potential of some quarterback run game in your game plan, which, again, I think would be an advantage to Texas. So I'm not calling for this as a way to, like, cut Quinn Ewers down. I'm calling for this to buoy the offense, and in a lot of ways it should help Quinn Ewers. Now, I will say this too. This is not a transitional move. This only works if Quinn Ewers is bought into the idea. Like, I have to believe this wouldn't happen. This wouldn't be the case, but, like, if Quinn Ewers doesn't hear about this idea until Thursday where they're going through their last practice, potentially how they schedule things during the week, that's not going to be a great way to go about it. This is a situation here where you help Quinn Ewers by giving something else to the offense. Now, do you help him by taking him off the field? Maybe you split him out wildcat-wise and you have some trick plays dialed in there. I don't know what it looks like exactly with Quinn Ewers, but I'm just saying it should be something that helps Quinn Ewers as well. It's not a thing where you take Quinn Ewers out of the game. Now, we do actually have to talk about this, though. With Quinn Ewers struggling, the unintentional benefit of having Arch Manning get some reps against A&M is the idea that, okay, you're kind of building in a little bit more of that emergency brake for your Texas offense. Because Quinn Ewers, let's just say that they are, gosh, I hate to even do this, but we're going to try. Let's say that Texas gets in there and they are down, call it 17-zip at half against A&M. Just roll with me. Say that happens. Say a big part of what's hurting them is the fact that that A&M front seven is getting after Quinn Ewers, and his ankle hurts, and he's not able to escape the rush, and just overall, like it feels like Georgia Part 2. And if you don't do something different, you're going to have some struggles. Well, if you've got the Arch Manning packages worked in throughout this game, in a perfect world, you're not throwing Arch Manning cold then into this game and saying, hey, Arch, need you to go play a little bit here for us. In a perfect world, he's kind of into the flow of things. You're able to get him a little bit more dialed into the game plan than he already was. Like it's a more seamless transition. So you don't do this for that, but it is, I think, an unintentional benefit of the fact that, okay, if things go crazy, if for whatever reason our Titanic is taking on water and we're sinking, it's a lot easier to tap in the guy who's gotten reps during the game as opposed to the guy that's like been holding a clipboard and wearing a headset for the entirety of the game. Catch my drift? So the prize pick square I love here, I think A&M and their secondary is a little bit suspect. Not bad, just a little bit ripe for the picking. They've allowed 50-yard pass plays in 6 of their last 8 games. Translation, Quinn Ewers, his passing yard total there, 237.5. We'll take the more. PrizePicks.com, code HARDCOUNT. $5 in lineups gets you $50 in promo funds. So again, by nature of me telling you I like that square, this is something that should ultimately benefit and bless Quinn Ewers. You take him out of the game, it's not blessing him. I hear you, but if it helps the offense, Quinn Ewers wants to win. Like I promise you, at the end of the day, Quinn Ewers wants to beat A&M. Now he wants to be a part of it. He's still a part of it in this equation. Allow your offense another gear, another layer, another level, another wrinkle during wrinkle season, and Arch Manning should, and I believe, I'll go so far as to say I predict he will get some snaps in this game against A&M, and it'll be in those design quarterback run packages. So we will watch with bated breath and see what Texas does there, but I think that's the move. I truly do. We got a conversation tomorrow with Aaron Murray, who is the SEC's all-time leading passer. He was a dog at Georgia, I guess, pun intended. Now does a tremendous job in the college football media space. He actually mentioned this, which kind of got the gear spinning for us a little bit. He went so far as to say he thinks that maybe you do pass the keys to Arch Manning just completely if you have some issues and take on water with Quinn Ewers in this game. Now, that's a whole other discussion. Tune in tomorrow for that. It'll be a really good time. So the Big 12 is just absolutely on fire. Absolute madness. Ross Dellinger does an awesome job for Yahoo Sports, and he, on Saturday night, when that final game ended, or we had like kind of a better gauge for how this final weekend was going to look as it pertains to conference title stakes, gave us a lot of breakdowns for, okay, well, Georgia's in. It's winner of A&M and Texas will play for the SEC championship. You got the Big Ten where Oregon's punched their ticket. If Ohio State beats Michigan, they're in. And then he got to the Big 12, and he's like, I think the way that he phrased it was everyone needs a beverage is the way that he phrased it with how that would shake out. We're going to do our very best here to break down the Big 12 scenario madness. Caden Smith, producer for the Hard Count, he and I got in the lab this morning and just went through this thing step by step like an algebra equation. So here's the scenarios for who could end up representing who in the or for who could represent the Big 12 in the conference title game. So what you need to know is there are 4 6-2 teams in the conference. So again, that's conference record. Just forget everything when it comes to the overall record. From a conference record, you have 4 6-2 teams. That is Arizona State. They are -9 this weekend against Arizona. You got Iowa State, favored by 2.5 against Kansas State. BYU, favored by 12.5 against Houston this weekend. And then Colorado, -16.5 against Oklahoma State. So those 4 teams, Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, 4 6-2 teams that are at the forefront of this discussion. So here's the easiest scenario. Here is the way that I think most people would like it to work out for their brain. Not for their rooting interest, just for their brain until I have to go into overdrive. The easiest scenario here is if any 2 of those 4 teams win and the other 2 lose, the winning teams are your conference title reps. So no matter how you dice it up. Colorado, they win. BYU and Iowa State lose, and then Arizona State wins. Colorado, Arizona State in your conference title game. That's just one variation of it, but again, you hear what I'm saying. Any 2 of those teams win, any 2 of those teams lose, pretty cut and dry, your conference title game. Now, here's kind of the honors level scenario that we need to unpack. If all 4 of those teams win, Arizona State, Iowa State, they're your conference champions, or your conference championship game representatives. Here's where things get a little bit Lindsay Lohan Freaky Friday. If 3 of those teams win, but one of those 4 teams lose, we got some madness. So we'll break that down team by team. If the 3 teams that win are Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, and then Colorado loses, you still have Arizona State and Iowa State. Now, if Arizona State is the team of that group of 4 that loses, you would have BYU versus Iowa State. If Iowa State is the team that loses of those 4 6-2 teams, you would have Arizona State versus BYU. We all tracking? Gosh, I hope so. I pray that we all are. Here's where it gets really, really nuts. Here's where you gotta if you have a cup of coffee next to you right now, I would encourage you to drink it. If you have a loved one next to you, make sure you tell them you care about them, because here we go. Here's the madness scenario. If you have 3 of those teams win, but the losing team is BYU, so Colorado, Iowa State, Arizona State, but BYU loses, here's where we go. Again, you buckle your chin strap. We're paying attention to West Virginia versus Texas Tech for tiebreaker purposes. So if West Virginia wins that game, and again, this is all in the world of BYU being the one team of those 4 that loses, you would have a conference title game of Arizona State and Iowa State. So again, if you're doing the math in your head here, Arizona State, Iowa State, still the most likely Big 12 title game scenario. However, if Texas Tech beats West Virginia, then you have Colorado and Arizona State playing each other. Again, all in the context of BYU being the one team of those 4 that loses. If Texas Tech wins that game versus West Virginia, you would have a Colorado versus Arizona State Big 12 title game. One more thing. If Texas Tech wins, you would have Colorado versus Arizona State unless both Baylor and Cincinnati get wins on Saturday. Baylor plays Kansas, Cincinnati plays TCU. So if Tech wins, and then Baylor wins and Cincinnati wins, all under the umbrella of, again, BYU being the 1 6-2 team to lose out of Colorado, Iowa State, Arizona State, and BYU, you would then have the conference title game of Colorado versus Iowa State. Are we all tracking? I think we're tracking. If not, the beautiful part about YouTube is you can go back, you can get out your scratch piece of paper and write this down and try and keep track of all the madness. Again, this is nuts. Whoever put the Big 12 tiebreakers together, I have to believe was just like, it'll be good. Don't even worry about it. There's no way that we have 4 6-2 teams going to last week of the season. So much so, in fact, that we only got the tiebreakers, I believe it was like last week. Like last week, they're like, okay, here's how it would work. I hope it doesn't go out this way, but here you go. Do your best. Now, I hesitate to even say this because we just talked through so many different scenarios. Here's the one thing I'll say. There are 5 5-3 teams within the Big 12 conference that have a chance to be in the Big 12 title game if and only if 3 of those 4 6-2 teams we just talked about, Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, if 3 of those teams lose, the door is propped open. Now, we could legitimately fill a probably an hour show unpacking those scenarios. We're not going to do that, but just know there's 5 5-3 teams in the Big 12 conference where if you get chaos, and again, all those 4 teams I mentioned are favored this weekend. If 3 of them were to lose, that would be the most 2024 college football season thing ever. But if it happens, the door is propped open for some 5-3 teams to get in the dance. And then we have a chance for a 5-3 conference team to find their way into the college football playoff by winning the Big 12. I mean, God bless the Big 12. We tweeted this. I'm going to have to go find this. I tweeted out before the year, hey, rest in peace to the Pac-12. But the Big 12 now may run where the Pac-12 was walking. They have lived up to the hype of filling the entertainment gap that may have been left from the Pac-12. Pac-12, they're bouncing back soon. Love to see it. Hey, a lot going on in the world of college football. We're glad to have y'all here. You got a lot of options. You can listen to any podcast, any YouTube show. The fact that y'all are here with us, man, we are grateful for it. We do not take it for granted. Something that is very, very special to us. Y'all being a part of this, making this show what it is. Tomorrow, Thanksgiving. No way they have a show, right? Oh, yeah. Yes way. Yes way. Full conversation with Aaron Murray. We talk college football playoff. We talk his thoughts on Georgia. We get his thoughts on the slate ahead of us in rivalry weekend. It's a good time, man. Aaron Murray brought the juice. We did our best to bring a picture of it as well. Aaron Murray also with just a smoking hot take when it comes to his preferred Thanksgiving dishes. Tune in for that. For Kane Smith on the ones and twos, Trey Yannity, quality control out there. For myself, JD PicKell, we love y'all. We are thankful for y'all. Enjoy Thanksgiving. We'll see y'all tomorrow. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all on Turkey Day.